Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a special Comic Art Spotlight. I'm your host, Bill Cox. As you know from Comic Art Fans and Comic Art Live, I wanted to start the show off tonight because I actually got a couple packages in the mail this past week, and nothing too special from Anthony, but he sent me a Dueling Dealers sticker. So he's kind of funny. He always likes to market stuff. It should have been a T-shirt or something, but I get a sticker. And George Hodge, he and I, when we did the interview a few weeks back, he said he was going to send me a bunch of stuff. And so I've got the comic and I've got some music. So I appreciate that, George. George is actually going to help us out in the collector chat on Sunday as we kind of cycle through people. So it's going to be cool to have George on there. And then last night I was actually over at Mike Berkey's. We were filming some memes for tomorrow's episode and many episodes to come. And Mike opens this box. He's just going through his mail, opens up a box. There are two boxes in the box. One box had my name on it. And the other box, of course, had Mike's name on it. And he's looking at me like, WTF, what's going on here? I mean, fate having you be in the room while I open this box with something in there. So we open it up and there's plenty of Thor gear in here. I've got it like a Thor, Baby Thor Gets Mad. I got this Thor golden book. Very cool. And I got a Thor hammer keychain. And probably best of all, Thor cologne. So I don't play Dueling Dealers to win, but we'll see if I ever get to wear the cologne at the end of that show sometime. And this came from Larry Wilson. And there also were some HeroClix with Destroyer and Thor. So really fun. I appreciate it, Larry. I know that we've helped each other out many times in the past, and that was just fun to get it. And Mike was very appreciative of all the items that were in his package as well. We were just chuckling because it was was so unexpected for me to be there. I hadn't been to his house in 3 or 4 weeks. So yes, Thor swag. Exactly. So good evening, everybody again. Larry, yes, exactly. Nope. Very appreciated. Trust me. So hey, I don't want to keep Rich waiting in the green room here. So let me pull in my guest this evening. Hey, Rich, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Absolutely fantastic.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm very flattered, honored.
No, well, you've been in the chat, I feel like, since day one. So this is like it's a year late. I always saw you in there, and I think one of these days I'm going to invite Rich. And
it's sheer boredom. The quarantine lockdown's got nothing. I'm not doing anything. I'm not working. We're not working by choice, mind you. But I mean, there's just not a lot going on. I can't go for beers with my friends. I don't. So.
I know. I think I've only been out to eat one time in the last 14 months. I haven't gone out. Yeah, like you haven't gone out for beers with anybody. And yeah, it is. I mean, it's maddening. If we didn't have this, what would we be doing?
Working.
Exactly. Sorry, just looking at the chat.
I apologize to everybody that I look like a red lobster, but I haven't figured out how to light this. Bill's got the perfect lighting, and I'm sort of caught in sort of a mid-dark room. I don't know why that would.
That's all right. Like I've gone through many different color shades where me trying to figure out the light, and do you use fluorescence and LEDs, and I finally got it figured out. So don't feel bad. Don't feel bad at all.
I'll have to wait for the second or third one for me to improve.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of time in the future to do more. But you're here this evening, and like we were talking earlier, I was like, I don't know where we would want to start, because I know that as you've certainly got one heck of a nice collection of original art, but you've got a career in comics and illustration and that sort of thing too. So I really felt like it would be best to just you tell me where you want to start as far as on the art side of things.
Start from the beginning. Start from
the beginning.
I am 58 years old. Born here in Scarborough. I've got one younger brother who's in the chat, Martin. We are both first-generation Canadians. Both of our parents were from Holland. Emigrated to Canada in the early 50s. And I started drawing from a really young age. I think I was in grade 1. That's as early as I can remember. I've actually posted some of that stuff on my Instagram. Just drawings that I had done for class. And then right when I began to get into grade 2, our parents moved both of us to a private Christian school. And it was kind of, it was akin to a Montessori type school, where they were kind of encouraged to follow your instincts. Like if you showed an interest in art, they would bury you with stuff to do with art. So that was great for me. I think
Right.
my math and my science suffered as a result. But so I drew all through grade school, from what I can remember. My introduction to comics is not what most people have. I think most of the collectors talk about going to shops or buying superhero titles on a regular basis, and that was not my situation at all. Me and my brother were gifted with, piles of comics of all genres, from, friends, relatives. Sometimes we would pick them up from church sales, but when we get new comics, it was always because, when we were growing up, our parents took us almost every summer. We would go down to Cape May, New Jersey, because we had relatives that lived in Wayne, New Jersey. I don't know how far that is from Snyder or anybody down there, but I know that there's a lot of comic books in the New Jersey area. So we would always get 5 comic books each, and then the back of the car, that would shut us up for quite a while. Halfway through the trip, you'd be going, "Mom, he's on my side. He's touching my side," and you'd have to, but then you'd have a detente, and then you would trade your 5 for his 5. And that would, again, sort of even things out. And then sometimes when you got down to your destination, you would get new comic books again. So that's kind of how we accumulated comics. I mean, I grew up with not a lot of superhero titles. I think I had a fair share of DC titles, more than I had Marvel titles. But I can remember a lot of Gold Key titles, like a lot of weird mystery titles, like the Boris Karloff ones and the Ripley's Believe It or Not ones. And then all the animated, type characters that were from Disney or whatever. And then the Harvey titles, Hot Stuff, Stumbo, that kind of thing. So it was up and down. There was no agenda to the whole thing. And then when I got to high school, for whatever reason, I just stopped drawing. I didn't think in my own mind that I should take art. I think there was a bit of a stigma in the high school we went to. Me and my brother both got sent also to a private Christian high school that was quite a ways from where we lived. But my parents thought it was important for us to go there. And there was kind of a stigma attached to taking the art class. You were either kind of a stoner or a loser, didn't fit in with all the other little cliques that you had in high school. So I did zero drawing at that time. I think maybe in my senior year, I did a little bit, because me and a couple of buddies were really into filmmaking, Super 8 filmmaking. So I would do costume designs and stuff like that. And then once I graduated, after grade 12, zero idea what I was going to do. I mean, the guidance office tries to prepare you about where you're going to go or what you're going to do, but I had no clue. So I decided to go back where I was living in Scarborough and take grade 13. At that time, in Ontario, they had a grade 13 that a lot of people took before they went into university. And so I just took all the slackest classes and spent all my time in the guidance office trying to figure out what I was going to do. And the guidance counselor had about 12 binders with every job you can imagine. And so I picked up the A binder and never really got past animation. Sorry. So I thought, well, that sounds great, because it's drawing, it's film, because me and my buddies all through high school on Friday nights, we were too young to drink, but we would always go down to the rep theater cinemas and watch like double bills of old movies. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, this is going to be great. And, but can I go to school around here? And then I found out that in Oakville, that was really one of the earliest animation colleges. They had a really good classical animation program. A lot of Disney feature animators, they got all their starts going to that college. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't that big of a commute, so I decided to do that. And I had one other guy that I used to travel with, Kevin Cliss. He lived kind of where I am living now. I moved over to Oshawa, which is east of where I was born and raised. But we went into Sheridan College. He only wanted to take the animation program because he was interested in comic books. And I thought, that's the weirdest thing. I said, why did you take the animation program? He said, well, there's no cartooning program. Sheridan actually had a cartooning program at one time. It didn't last, but they used to bring up Bernie Wrightson, and Will Eisner used to do seminars for the students. And it was quite a big deal. Like, if you've ever seen the fanzine Gamut, that was the students of that cartooning program. that was part of their program, is to do a story that would get published, and then that would be kind of their entry into hopefully getting paid work. I think Jim Craig got his start that way. But anyway, I went into school thinking that animation was my thing. And the funny thing is that I dropped out. I mean, I went in 82, and in the second year, we had to work on a group film, me and Kevin Kliss, and we didn't get our film done. So they made us repeat our second year. It's a 3-year program. It was a community college too, by the way. It was only like $660 a year. Nowadays, it's a university program. It's a 4-year program. And I think for international students, you've got to pay something like $10,000 a year. The price went way, way up. And so I got halfway through repeating my second year, and I just said, this isn't working out. Because at that time, I was more interested, oddly enough, in comic books. And then Kevin was more interested in animation. He stuck it out for the full 3 years, but 4 years for him in his case. But so I dropped out in 85 and decided I was going to become a comic artist, not realizing at the time that there was zero money working as a comic book artist. I mean, even the ones that I kind of knew, they were always pinching pennies and, trying to make bills. So I don't even know where I should go from here. That's when I sort of hung around. Kevin kind of was the one that introduced me to the idea of direct retail shops. And that's kind of when I really got into my comic book buying habit. We used to go down and hit the shops on Queen Street West. The big ones were, of course, the Silver Snail, and then there was also the Dragon Lady. Mm-hmm. And I was more interested in adult comics. Like I kind of had an interest in the current comics, but I was really interested in something that was a little more of my age range. So I stumbled across heavy metal, and then I fell in love with Mobius, Enki Bilal, Kaza, and all the great French artists. And then not only that, but because it was the North American version of Metal Hurlant, you also had Arthur Suydam, and you had Richard Corbin, and a lot of great Americans. So one issue of Heavy Metal did a profile on the studio book, and even in the blurb reading the studio book with Wrightson, Kaluta, Barry Smith, and Jeff Jones, I recognized some of the artwork that I had kind of seen somewhere along the way. And I think that in those days when I was getting comics with my brother, that there were a few Wrightson Swamp Things in the mix. I'm pretty sure I had the Batman Swamp Thing crossover there. Mm-hmm. And then I think I must have come across A Shadow by Kaluta. So then I really got on a whole thing where I wanted to find out more of their work, because I thought that stuff was fantastic. I mean, Wrightson and Kaluta were my guys after that. And I used to go to the Silver Snail and just go through their bins, because they had a much better back issue section. And then I came across the DC mystery titles, House of Mystery and House of Secrets. And that was kind of my thing. I mean, that was, if I had to say the titles that I collected, those would be the two. And then anything that kind of sort of sprang off from that. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, once I got into comic books, then I was sort of introduced. The manager of the Silver Snail at that time was Mark Asquith, and I always describe him as kind of ground zero for the Toronto comic book scene. He was kind of the nexus of nerddom. He managed the store immaculately, and not only that, but they had other stores as well. Ron Van Leeuwen was the guy that sort of owned the Snail, but he also owned Andromeda distribution. If you remember in those days, there were like a dozen distributors all over the place. So he was the one that covered most of Canada. And then I think in '87, Mark, he knew that I was interested in comics and that I wasn't making much headway. And I was actually doing fan illustrations that I would send off to Amazing Heroes, and I got 8 or 9 of those published in the letter section. So, because I knew from Rice and Kaluta's background that the way they got into the business was working on fanzines. But of course, when I grew up, there were no fanzines left anymore. Like there were no Squatrons or Spoffons or Wits End, so there wasn't a whole lot of avenues for young artists to sort of get their work seen. But he decided that it might be a good idea for me to work for Andromeda in '87. He knew I was a dropout. So he said, why don't you go work over there? And so that was fun. I got to see sort of comic book distribution from the ground floor.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I think the distribution was on Fridays, if I can recall. So all Thursday early morning, you would be getting the comic books. First of all, they had to drive over the border, the U.S. border, to pick up the comics, come back in a truck, an old sort of Korean Hino packed with comics, and then they would shove it down to the basement floor, and we would make orders. We would pull orders for all the Toronto shops, Ottawa, Montreal, and then they also had accounts in the Maritimes and in the middle of Canada and even in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was the only one that had a half decent driving record and a license, because the other slobs that I worked with, they were all in a punk band and they were not the most responsible people. So I got chosen to do the midnight duty of driving Ron Van Leeuwen's little rickety Toyota pickup to the bus terminal. So we could send off the Ottawa and the Montreal accounts that way. And then I would also, after that, I would immediately get on the highway and drive out to Toronto Airport to the cargo section and fill up a cargo bin so it could get sent out to the coasts. So I really saw everything from the ground floor.
Right. They kept you busy. That's the
really busy, yeah.
One.
Yeah. And by that time, my buddy Kevin had finished the shared animation program, and he couldn't find work right away. So I said, well, why don't you work in the warehouse with us? So I helped him get a job at Andromeda. And then I think he got a job first. I think Nelvana was looking for people in '89 to work on Beetlejuice. They had just gotten the Beetlejuice series.
Mm-hmm.
So he got a job, and then he said, listen, they're still looking for people. Why don't you take a test? And I hadn't even really thought that much about animation that much anymore. But I thought it's drawing, and you get paid for it, so maybe that's a good idea. So I went down there, took a test, and got the job. So that was my entry into the animation business.
Wow. So no more midnight runs to the airport?
No, I got to kiss off those guys. It got a little out of hand at the end there because Ron Van Leeuwen, he owned 4 different snail stores, and we'll talk about that as we get to the Kaluta pick first. But he started to get into toys as well. Like he had a huge backstock, but the comic shop sort of ceased becoming just a pure comic shop. It started to get into the collectibles and stuff like that. I guess it was the beginning of that. But at that time, for whatever reason, they were selling realistic looking handguns and machine guns that shot little white pellets. And when you got to the early hours of Thursday, early getting into Friday morning, those 2 punk rockers would just run amok with those guns. And they weren't supposed to even touch the guns, but they would load up with those white pellets and have these huge fights all over the place. And it just got to be a little crazy.
You were happy to leave.
Well, I mean, I basically quit on Ron because Ron, he was a bit of I think he got, to his credit, he started a whole comic, enterprise on his own because he was selling comic books out of the back of a science fiction bookstore on Queen Street called Bacca. And I think his sort of backroom operation got to be even more popular and big than the science fiction bookstore. So they didn't even want him around anymore. So that's when he opened up his shop. And then things just sort of grew from there. So, but he was I feel like he got too much money too early because he was really a bit of an ass. And he wanted me to not only gas up the truck every time, but to wash it down. And I felt like I was doing personal duties for the guy. Yeah. And I thought, this guy is a troublemaker. So I really appreciated working for the warehouse manager was Tom Stormonth. And when, Steve Geppy sort of consolidated, remember when he bought up distributor after distributor, he just went across North America and started buying them all up. So Ron Van Leeuwen eventually sold Andromeda so that Geppy had a monopoly. And then not only that, but he took Tom Stormonth to, where's it, Baltimore, Maryland, I think is where he had his operation. I can't remember. But Tom was really the guy that was in charge of all of the toy buying and collectible buying for his catalog, for the previous catalog for many years. He's since moved back to Ontario and he opened up a bookstore up north. So he's still involved with books. But the biggest thing that I remember from Tom is that when he moved to Maryland, he sold off a lot of his stuff. And he had a hardcover copy of A Look Back, which you couldn't find anywhere. That Wrightson book was like, people were spending $200 or $300 for it. And so he let me have his copy. I had to pay $3 to get it, but yeah, so. Then when I remember I met Bernie for the first time at a Toronto show, and I thought, this is going to be great. He's going to know that I'm a real fan because I've got to look back, original. I give it to him, and he just takes a black Sharpie and signs Bernie right on the cover. And he looked kind of surly too. Like, somebody told me afterwards that this was just when Bernie had divorced, and he was traveling with a really young blonde girl who I just assumed was his daughter, but it was a girlfriend that he had picked up along the way. So, yeah, the stories that you see when you stick around long enough. So I don't know. That's my origin story. I've still got a lot of comics, and I mean, I did go through my X-Men period. I was really a big Paul Smith mark, so I bought all that stuff, and his Doctor Strange stuff that I bought. But I'm a guy that was always artist focused first. I never was attached particularly to characters per se, or specific specific characters. Or I tended to not go for the the underwear guys. I think I was always more of a Doc Strange type guy or a Thor guy. I mean, I love Thor. Monsters like Swamp Thing or Hulk. I didn't appreciate Kirby when I was young, but then when I got much older, I just fell in love with that stuff too. So
sure.
And then, of course, you fall into you go down the whole Steve Rude rabbit hole. Anytime he does a character, it seems like he's trying to do a Kirby version. So that stuff is always great too.
Yeah, no, I admire Steve's work a lot. But yeah, I think most people went through an X-Men phase. Paul Smith was always my, after Cockrum, I think he was my favorite. I mean, I love Byrne's work on the run too, but I just fell in love with Smith once he took over the book.
Clean design, great action, storytelling. I don't know if I've seen his stuff lately, and it doesn't really move me quite as much. There's a few times when artists have a bit of an arc where you hit a sweet spot, and then it kind of either evens out or tails away. Like, I mean, I haven't seen anything that he's done lately that has really sort of dazzled me, but I remember those periods really, really fondly.
Oh yeah, well, there wasn't anything like it at the time, really.
Yeah,
as far as the style. I mean, it was so clean and simple, and
so that's why I don't have any kind of, I know that a lot of people that come on, they like to talk about, George Perez or John Byrne. I never went through any of those phases. I mean, I'm probably going to disappoint a lot of people, but that stuff was always kind of a little bit too middle of the road for me. Maybe a little bit too much in the mainstream it just didn't appeal to me. It was good, solid drawing, and that's really my thing. I want to see good, solid drawing, but it didn't dazzle me, I guess, in any particular way. So,
well, nothing wrong with that. I mean, I really didn't get into Perez until later, but Byrne's work I definitely appreciated. I definitely liked his earlier work more than his later work. But
yeah, I mean, I recognize that guy was huge at the time, and of course, he was Canadian as well, so we always have to hear about it in Toronto newspapers. This guy is now taking over Superman, blah 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 blah. Biff Bob, Biff Pow. These aren't just for kids anymore. Lordy.
Right. So okay, so you were doing animation, but when did you I guess the art purchasing bug? What was like the first piece of artwork that you got that you would consider a piece that was for your collection, whether you knew it or not?
So before Mark actually hired me to work at Andromeda, I was there almost every comic Friday, and would hang around. And he was always good at sort of recommending me or talking to me about what was going on in comics. He really had his finger on the pulse. This is a guy that later on, I don't know if you are familiar with the Prisoners of Gravity show.
No.
But it was a show on our version of PBS called TVO, and he used to do interviews with comic artists and science fiction authors and stuff like that. And then later on, he went into he was a producer at the Space Channel in Canada, the Space Channel, and he really built his Rolodex of contacts when he was working at the Snail, because what he would do is, and I don't know if everybody had a store in their city like this, but he used to bring in artists for signing appearances all the time. I mean, I happened to miss the Paul Smith one, which always bothered me, but saw Bill Sienkiewicz a bunch of times, John Romita Sr. He brought Mobius, if you can imagine that, Kevin Nola. There's probably other people that I'm not even thinking about right now. And then what he would do is he would book a signing schedule, and they were usually there to promote projects that they had, just published either through Marvel or DC. So he would book all the signing appearances for all the snail stores, not just the snail store in Toronto on Queen Street, but we had a Queen Street store that was at Yonge and Eglinton, it's kind of the north part of Toronto. There was one in Hamilton, which is about a half hour southwest of Toronto, past the school, Oakville, where I used to go for animation school. And then I think they even for a short time had a store in Ottawa. So what he would do is he would bring people in, and then usually he would book them for the Saturday or the Sunday for the snail store in Toronto, but he would bring them to the Hamilton store on the Friday, the Thursday or the Friday. He would kind of have it that way. Mm-hmm. And the Hamilton store was run by a guy named Stuart Young, and Hamilton isn't as big as Toronto, and I'm not sure what the level of fandom was at that time, but I think Mark was always concerned that maybe a bunch of people wouldn't show up. He always wanted to have people there for the artists to talk to and to sort of engage them. So he started bringing me with him. When he went to Hamilton, he would say, well, why don't you come with me? So the first time that I bought a piece of art was when Kaluta came to Toronto. But I first met him in Hamilton sort of the night before or the day before. So you can sort of pop up the Rocketeer sketch. And that was that's the first piece of artwork that I ever got. And you can even see that, I didn't want to sort of cut into line being the guy from Toronto. I thought, let's let the Hamilton people pick what they want to do. And because I had already been to a couple of store appearances where artists were drawing stuff. So I figured I don't want to sort of cut the line. But I knew that I wanted him to do either a Batman or a Shadow, obviously, because that was his sweet spot. That's what the characters that people most associated him with. And then, of course, the two people in front of me, one guy wanted a Batman, and the other guy wanted a Shadow. So then I was stuck. I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to get him to do? And I thought, well, it's got to be kind of a pulpy type of a character. And I didn't even know if he had heard of the character, but I said, would you mind doing a Rocketeer for me? And his eyes just went wide. And he said, that's my favorite book right now. So I thought, oh, bingo. I hit the jackpot. So he said, I don't think I've ever really drawn him before. Can you go through the store and sort of find me some reference? So I was going through the bins, and I think this was 85. So I think Eclipse might have had the special edition Rocketeer that was out on the stands at that time. So I brought him that. But you can see that even the way that Mike signed it, he wrote Dave Stephen _S. And this is a frustration that I go through too, having an S at the end of my Danny's name.
Right.
People don't say Danny's, they just say Danny's, like Danny's Auto Service or Danny's Pizza. So it's Dave Stevens. So, but he did a great job on it. And, years later on, I found out that the inspiration for the Rocket Pack itself was actually something Dave stole from one of Mike Kaluta's Time Warp covers. I forget where I saw this first. Somebody might have posted it on the Dave Stevens Facebook page. But if you go to Time Warp, the Time Warp 5 cover, you'll actually see that the Rocket Pack is part of a robot. It's on the cover. But he did a really nice job on the sketch. I was really pleased to get it. And then I guess that kind of put the hook in me, getting more art. Mark Asquith had already told me, he said, if you really want to be a comic book artist, what you really need to do, because he had already seen a few things that I had published in Amazing Heroes, and I was always complaining about how the line work was starting to disappear on me. He says, well, that's the problem. You've never really seen an original up close. What you got to do is you got to buy an original art page. And you can figure out the line weights, if you're one and a half up or twice up. It'll help you, you'll learn from it. So I thought, okay, I could see that. It'd be an education if I got more art. So the next piece that I got, same thing. I went back to Hamilton with Charles Vess this time. The nice part about these trips was that when Mike brought me, we would do the appearance, and then afterwards we would all go to lunch together. And I didn't have to pay anything either because it was all on Ron Van Leeuwen's tab. I don't know if he knew about it, but Mark was basically taking the store credit card and basically taking us all out to lunch. And so that worked out pretty good.
Yeah, not bad at all.
Yeah.
You want me to show off the best?
Yeah, show off the best, sure. So this was the very first page of the Warriors 3. It appeared in Marvel 34, I think. And the year was, let me get my glasses out, 1987. So Vess had already done Raven's Banner, and I wasn't a huge mark for Charles Vess. I thought he was good, but and he shared it at that time. He shared a studio with Kaluta still, and but I really like this page because if there's one thing that Vess does really well, it's those trees, those gnarly sort of trees. And this was kind of an introduction to the whole story. You had the three witches, the Norn sisters, that were basically introducing you to the tale they were going to tell. You can see they're sort of weaving the webs of, what does it say, God's own destiny. And then it's got Heimdall with his big horn. The Marvel, I've got sort of a love-hate relationship with the Marvel Universe movies that are out, because I just did not imagine Idris Elba as Heimdall, a large black man. I didn't think that was going to work. But it does work. I shouldn't be surprised. But let's face it, it's a Viking legend. There weren't too many brothers that were, operating in Valhalla, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I loved him in The Wire. He's a great actor.
No, it worked for me too. I mean, being a Thor fan, I wasn't sure either, but no, it was great. And I mean, Vess is certainly a good choice. I mean, he was hanging around Kaluta and Wrightson in the late 70s. I mean, they were all kind of pals as they were getting started. I mean, I did that one interview with the gallery owner from New York back in that time, and some of the photos that he shared with me had Vess in them, with all the guys from the studio. So it was pretty cool.
I'm sure he was there. Another person that was there was Sandy Plunkett. He was hanging around at that time as well. They were all New York people, New York City people. So
yeah, well, that's a keeper in my book. I love that page.
Yeah, that one. And he actually said I was a good guy. He signed it to me. He said, "You're a really good guy." So I thought that was nice too.
Yeah, heck yeah.
I like to be thought of as a good guy.
So that was bought. Was that bought from one of the signing appearances?
Yeah. It's actually, the price is on there, $75 if you can believe it. It's unbelievable. So that was 1987. And,
wow. The good old days.
Yeah. That's another thing you should know about me, is I'm a real cheapskate. I mean, that's the Dutch genes coming through. After the Scottish people, the Dutch are very cheap. So I'm always looking for bargains.
Well, there aren't any more out there. Not many out there anymore.
Yeah. Those days have kind of ended in a big way. So, but the nice part now is that because I'm older, I've actually got. And sadly, me and my brother, our father passed away in, I think it was 2017. But and even though he was, he was not a rich guy, he just had a very sort of. He worked at a Bix pickle plant he was the shipping supervisor forever. And, so he didn't make a lot of money, but he invested really soundly, so that when he passed, me and my brother both got quite a chunk of change. So it gives us a lot of flexibility as far as the way we work now. We take jobs when we want to take them. And in my case, I've got a bit of a sort of a treasure chest to spend on original art when I think it's appropriate. So that works out good too.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's look at some more art.
Just keep coming. I'm sure, yeah.
So we were talking before we started today. You talked about going to San Diego Comic-Con. When were those first shows that you were going there?
First show was 97.
Yeah.
And at that time, I mean, you and I were both in the CFA APA.
Mm-hmm.
But even at that time, I was already in the APA. Let me just figure out when I started. I did 2 tours. So actually, I started in June of 95.
Oh, that's a few years before I started.
Issue 37, I think, was a Neil Adams issue, if I'm correct. And then at that time, I didn't know this at the time. I basically found the CFA APA through the back pages of the Comic Buyer's Guide. That's how I was buying my pages. You got to remember, this is like pre-eBay and all the other stuff. So that's the only way that I could find stuff. And then I saw an ad for this thing, and they were original art collectors. And at that time, I already knew about original art. And I knew that I wanted to see as much obscure stuff that wasn't published as I could. So I contacted Bob Capani, who was the editor at that time. He was an ophthalmologist, I think, who lived somewhere in the center of California. And John Province was there at that time. And somewhere along the way, when I was a member, there were political infight. There was political infighting going on, and I didn't quite understand what it was all about. But there were some members sort of hacking on other members, and it just got to be not quite so much fun. And I think Bob Capani he decided he was going to step down and leave the APA. But when I went down every time I went down to San Diego Con, that was the big deal. Bob Capani would put on a CFA APA dinner for everybody and pick up the bill too. It was insane. So the first time I went down in '97, I went down with Tom Ranheim, who was the webmaster of the Dave Stevens homepage, the official Dave Stevens page on the internet. And then I went in '99 and 2001. I went 3 times with Tom, and then I went a 4th time until 2003 on my own. But going to those dinners was a gas, because I would always park myself somewhere between Bill Stout and all those guys were. Oh yeah. I thought anybody that can talk about for Frank Frazetta with authority, that's the guy I want to sit next to, because I was a Frank Frazetta nut, still am. So those were great. That was great fun. And then when he left, I thought, well, maybe I should just leave too. So I left, and then eventually Dave Newton and Benno Rothschild and maybe Ray Cuthbert to a degree all talked me into coming back to the APA. So then I did another. It's 12 years total, and I think the second one was let's see here. So I was there from 2004 to 2011. So
wow.
So I wrote quite a bit. Let me just show you for a minute. So this is what 12 years of articles look like. I actually went in and
oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It was just too much information for you.
You end up publishing your artwork in there too. Here's a Fessenden model sheet I had by Mark Schultz and stuff that you had that's disappeared. I had to sell a few things here and there too. But yeah. So, and then there were a lot of nice sort of extras that you got from just being associated with those guys. Like after Bob left, he had a real close relationship with Dick Sprang, the vintage Batman artist, and he self-published this great book, The Art of Richard Sprang. And the thing is, he gifted only certain members of the APA with this. So, he had a shit list that there were people that were not going to go. So you got to kind of respect that kind of thumbing your nose at it. So there's only 200 copies of this. This is 162 of 200.
Wow,
that was a pretty good.
I think I only got a T-shirt or two. I remember getting an Alex Toth shirt. And
did you ever get one of these?
I did not. No.
This is something that Gary Land put together. He put together 3 or 4 of these, and this is the first 20 issues. And I wasn't even a member at that time, but it's got some great stuff in here. It's got interviews with Russ Heath and Mike Kaluta and a bunch of other people. So,
dang, I'll have to ask him if he's got any laying around.
yeah. So, I
was just emailing with him yesterday.
I haven't, he's a hardcore Trumper, so I had to kind of, even though I think I still have him as a Facebook friend, but he's definitely on snooze or permanent snooze. Those guys,
yeah,
they wear me down.
I do that on Facebook all the time. Just there's certain people out there that I just who are close friends of mine, but I have to drown all that stuff out, because you could just waste all your time. I've got
close friends that are anti-vaxxers and people like that. And it's frustrating because you think you seem like such a sensible guy when we were friends. Like, can I still be your friend? I don't know.
Well, Alex Chen says he knows. I know this Rich.
That's right, Alex. Yes, Alex has actually published quite a few great books. I've got a few of them that he's put together. So
yes, he has. Absolutely.
No, he was great fun having members. And
So
Benno kind of invited me back a little while ago, but I just think that part of my life is behind it. There was a lot of work to put those articles together, and I had a whole system sort of laid out. I had a scanner, a big sort of scanner that worked, and a printer, but they were all on my old Mac, which had SCSI connections. And then as sort of Mac upgraded, all that stuff I can't use anymore. And I think I was using PageMaker, Aldus PageMaker to put it together.
Mhm.
I don't even know what I would use for a page making type of thing nowadays. I have a Wacom that I use for work, but I'm familiar with Photoshop.
There's Adobe products for that now, but
I'm sure there are.
I got my start doing that too. I was in, I got into pre-press in the mid '90s and worked on my first Mac at that time, and just did a lot of goofy stuff. I mean, redrawing logos and but yeah, it was. It was the coolest thing ever, right? I mean, that was like the first really digital.
We finally had all that
art-related job.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But that was back then. But I knew websites were going to be more fun, so that was the first chance. Somebody called the office one day and said, we're looking for a web designer, and and I was always there an hour before everybody else, and I'm like, I think I know somebody who might be able to take that on. And so I left pre-press as soon as I could and took that job.
I mean, we'll get there eventually, but the reason I actually went to San Diego at all was that Amazing Heroes used to put together those preview specials, and me and Tom Ranheim, we were hardcore Dave Stevens fans. So he did a little short interview in that one issue. I think it even had a Stevens cover. I'm not sure, but he was saying a lot of things about the industry that I kind of felt myself too, like that the people that really were deliberate and spent a lot of time working on their art weren't seeing any kind of reward for it. The publishers weren't appreciative of the fact that some work took longer than others. And I think at that time he was already having a hard time sort of continuing on with the Rocketeer. He did Rocketeer as kind of a lark to fill in a bunch of pages for Pacific Comics at the time. He never thought that it would take off. Mm-hmm. But then when it did, of course, then he was asked to come up with a monthly book, and that was never going to happen either. So I wrote him, and I never really do this, but I wrote him kind of a gushy fan letter saying that, that the stuff you were saying in that interview really spoke to me, and I love your work, and here's a few samples. I think I even sent him that Kaluta Rocketeer that I had in the mail, and then he surprised me with a really nice letter back saying, listen, your stuff looks pretty good. How'd you like to try out a page of the Rocketeer, penciling on the Rocketeer for me? And I mean, I nearly fell out of my chair, right? I couldn't believe it. So I wrote him back, said, yes, please, please, please. So he sent me a postcard back saying he was going to send me a page, going to send me the reference. And this was in 1988. And so I think it was January of 88 when I got the postcard. And then I waited through February and through March and April, May. And then I thought, something's up. He's not going to send me anything. And because I already sent him my phone number and he never really got back to me. So that was kind of a serious disappointment. But at the same time, I learned a very valuable lesson that for your own dreams, you shouldn't depend on another guy to fulfill your own kind of thing. You got to do it yourself. That's the way he did it, So, and he probably had 30 other things going at the time, and just thought, how am I going to let this guy down? And maybe didn't want to go there. So in '97, when me and Tom went, he went there as a hardcore fan, just dying to meet him. But I went there with a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I thought, this is the guy that fucking, dropped me like a red hot hammer. And so it was an awkward first meeting. But Dave is such a sweet guy that he kind of won us over, and eventually took us back to LA and took us out to dinner. And so, I mean, gaining a friendship, even if the work wasn't there, it was still worth it for me. Mm-hmm. So, and then of course the follow-up conventions got even better, like 99 and 2001. We got to hang out with him and Kaluta. You get those two together, two knuckleheads together, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, those were good times.
Wow, you were very fortunate to be able to to hang out with both of them.
Yeah.
At that time in their careers, that's pretty amazing.
It gets even better after that, because I know that Bill Stout is on record as saying that he's the guy that talked Dave into doing a sketchbook. And I don't want to say that he's wrong because when I went there, Bill had a whole table of his own sketchbooks.
Hmm.
But I think it was in '99 when Mignola came out with his first sketchbook. It was just a little one, like a digest size. And it was limited to 1,000 copies, signed and numbered. And it was $20 a pop. And so I bought one. And then I think in day 2, Mignola had already sold out. So I went to Dave. I said, why don't you do a sketchbook? Like, do the math. This is $20,000 in your pocket. And you're just as popular, if not more popular than Mignola. So it's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. So sure enough, the next year, he goes and he publishes actually 2001 is when I suggested it to him. 2002 is when he published his first one. And then he mailed it to me. I said, I don't know how I'm going to get a copy, so make sure that you mail a copy to me. So he mailed it to me. And then I had the idea, why can't I do a friggin' sketchbook? I've got enough material. So I took his and basically took it to the printer and said, make me something like this, like it's saddle stitched. And so I came up with this. Wang Dang Doodle. You can see it's got a sort of sexy Mignola Ates cover.
Yeah, and very cool.
It's got animation work in here. It's got all kinds of stuff. There's a 3-parter. There's a 3-parter that let's see if I can get it closer. When we get to the Darwin Cook piece, there was when TCAF had the first TCAF, they had sort of a money raising thing where they gave out this sort of 3-panel template that you could kind of do your own thing. Mm-hmm. And so I did a couple of them thinking that, but once I did them, I liked them so much that I didn't want to sell them because you're supposed to sell them. They had like a gallery of old ones. And then $15 was supposed to go back. It was going to all sell for $20 across the board. $15 was going to go to the artist. And then $5 was going to go to sort of a fund, a kitty to sort of promote the next TCAF because, at that time they weren't moved into the reference library, the Toronto Reference Library. So they didn't have a free venue. They had to go pay for venues. And they were bringing up artists. They had plenty of costs involved to the whole thing. So, but anyway, when I went down in 2003, I talked Dave I said, Dave, you wouldn't mind because I don't have a table. I said, could I sell this from your table? And he said, sure. So that was like the ultimate fan experience, right? I mean, you can't get any better than that. And so everybody that would come by to talk to Dave would take a look at my sketchbook, would want to ask me about it. And Bud Plant came by. He said, who's this guy? And Dave says, oh, you should check it out. It's pretty good. And so Bud goes, well, if you got some left over at the end of the show, give them to me. I think I came down with 2 boxes of so that's about 200 copies. And I think I sold maybe half a box from Dave's table. And then he said, if you've got 100 of them, I just gave him 1 box. That was right. 1 box I didn't have to take with me back to Toronto.
Yep. But Bud was very good about that. I mean, because I helped out a lot of dealers around that time, and he would always swing by and make the same offer. You got anything left over? Bring it by because we're going to have room on the truck.
Super savvy guy and a real fan of the medium. It's all genuine with him. He's just a real sweetheart. So
yeah. No, I know it was. But yeah, that was a usual thing, was lugging sketchbooks from the Splash Page art booth over to Bud's area at the end of the show, and they'd square things up.
And it's trickier for me because I was coming over from Canada, and then you had to kind of explain to customs, well, what are you doing with these 200 copies of this sketchbook? I had to try to sort of sell them on the story that I was a salesman and these were samples or something. I can't remember how I did it, but I didn't find out till years later that I could have gotten on the floor right away because I was an animation professional at that time. I could have got on early. That's another lesson I learned collecting original art is when I went in '97, I was new to the whole thing. I definitely went to preview night to go check out the artwork, but I was still stuck at the top of what I call the hopper.
Yeah.
When they open it up and then everybody spills down on the floor, everyone racing to the table where they think they can get the best deal. So in '97, well, we'll get to that. I should just wait and post the next piece of artwork.
All right, we can move on to some art.
Sure.
All right, let me pull the next one up.
So this is Art Suydam. This was before I even went to San Diego. I was still operating on stuff that was in the back of the CBG. And I know that Arthur is kind of a controversial figure in that I didn't realize that at the time. I really only knew his work from heavy metal and also from the DC mystery titles. These are from, I think, House of Mystery 261, pages 2 and 3. And I think I bought these from Peter Koch. And I didn't really know much about Peter Koch, but I had a bit of a snail mail correspondence with him. And I asked him about the pages, and he wrote me back sort of a letter scrawled on a letter-sized piece of paper. And I swear to God, I think he wrote it in crayon, and there were spelling mistakes. And I thought, is this guy like all together? Like, I didn't know what to make of the whole thing, but the price was right. These are like $50 a piece. So I sort of gambled and bought them both. And the interesting thing about this story is that if you collected heavy metal, there was a story that Arthur Suydam had in one of the issues called Bad Breath. And it was published, I think, in, let me just check my notes here, October of '79. It was an 8-pager. Now, this one is called In the Two Faces of Death, and this was published by DC in October '78. But there are pastovers in this story that are direct lifts from the Bad Breath story that was published a year later in heavy metal. And I'd read interviews with Art Suydam that when he first went into DC, he had entire stories that were fully painted, and DC looked at it and said, what are we supposed to do with this? We do black and white artwork here, and then we color them on newsprint or on cheaper stock or whatever. So I think he must have lifted a bunch of these panels from that story. The guy sitting on the subway on the page on the left there, where he's sitting on the subway, that's a shot of a guy walking in Bad Breath, and then the guy sort of holding his head in the next page at the very first panel, that's also from that story. So, but the thing that attracts me to this is that it just has a real, it really oozes that sort of weird David Lynch kind of weird world, a wet sort of ugly, strange people in it. That guy that's sort of on the page on the left, he's sort of, was he drooling on that girl that's in the...
Or something, gnawing on the shoulder. I don't know.
And then you got Miss Dumple sitting there who almost looks like she's subhuman. And then the guy asking him to handle the grinder looks like a serial killer. And then in that last panel, this is something that you don't see very often in a kid's comic, is that he sticks his hand directly into a meat grinder. And the owner of the shop is worried about his insurance rates. He's got no concern for the guy. But the problem with this guy is he's getting no sleep because he's having these nightmares of a black knight that fights him every time he falls asleep. He has a nightmare. And in the Bad Breath story, it's a guy that can't get to sleep. But he's actually got a demon living inside of him. So it's weird to just sort of compare the two together. And then that weird rummy, the page on the right where the guy, that big head in the foreground. At first I thought that was a book that he had in front of him, but it's a Mickey. He's some sort of rummy in the park that's just right down there on the ground. And then the bust, what I call the breakout panel, that's a paste over of that guy. And that's the one image that I haven't been able to place from the previous story. I don't know where that came from, or if he just decided to do that as a paste over so that it could sort of explode from the panel. It's very effective. He's basically kicking him right outside of the panel.
Yeah.
So, and just all the shadows and that shirt that he's wearing in the second last panel with the holes and then that guy behind the counter, he looks like he's subhuman too, like some sort of missing link. He's got hair all over, sort of like fungus growing on him or something. So yeah,
very David Lynch, without question.
And then when I met him years later, I met him at a 2004 Toronto show, and boy, what a disappointment in real life. I had collected books of his because at that time he was publishing his own art books, and I thought, well, it'd be fun to get that stuff signed. And so I went to his table, and I guess his agent is Renee Witterstauer, or is that her name? Witterstauer.
I know. Yeah, I know.
She's kind of his rep, and she said, "Well, he's not going to sign that for free." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, well, if you buy one of his books, he'll sign it. But if you want to bring a book to him, you've got to pay to have it signed. I said, excuse me? Like, I heard of celebrities, signing, charging fees to have stuff autographed, but this was a new one on me. And he was very aloof and just not a lot of fun to be around. And frankly, none of his art in the last 10, 15 years has done much for me. I think the last thing I bought with any kind of enthusiasm was he did a Death Dealer one shot for erotic. That was
I do remember that. Yeah,
he was really channeling Frazetta at that point, like better than Bisley was, and so that might have been the last thing I bought from him.
Well, they always say that you're not always it's not always fun to meet the people that you admire.
Yeah,
Sometimes
you shouldn't meet your heroes. Yeah, so.
Exactly.
But that period is the sweet spot for me. The DC. Because Blackline Fever, I keep looking for stuff, and Blackline Fever has an entire story, a 10-page story. Did you see it? Yeah, for $5,000.
Yeah.
So it's $500 a page. You think that's a great deal, but I re-looked at that story, and I think it's one of the first stories he did, and it's not quite. It's a little thin on the artwork. I think the story is great. Don't get me wrong. It's a really fun story, but I didn't really want to pull that. I actually emailed him. I said, if you have any individual pages of his stuff, I would jump on it, but this is just too much for me to jump on. So yeah,
I check out Blackline's site usually like every other month just to see
if there's anything. He's not on your site, is he?
No, not at all.
I was a little leery about actually because I bought my one of my Nolan pages, Nolan pieces from him, and I didn't really know him that well, so I was a little bit leery about because it's a post office box. You don't, the address looks a little shady, like so. But no, he came through. He was really good. So.
Well, I can actually say, I'm not going to say who I'm going to work with, but I'm working with somebody that I'll be redesigning their site that people have wanted me to work with for a while. And they definitely, but it's not Spencer Beck.
Okay.
It's not that site, but
I don't really, I've never had an issue with anybody. I mean, I sort of joke about the Connollys a little bit but I met those at the San Diego Con, and they're a peculiar pair, but I've never really bought anything from them. And I don't want to have to email them for prices every time I see something I like. So I don't.
Yeah, usually those are barriers for me as well, where I'm not going to go into that direction. I like things that are priced what I want. I don't like to haggle. So yeah.
There's plenty of stuff on his site that looks really, really nice. So
I agree. Well, why don't we look at another piece of artwork?
Yeah, keep going.
All right. Nice.
So this was this was an unusual convention. It was in 1988. And of course, I was already working at Andromeda, but I still had my sort of dreams about becoming a comic book artist. This because it was before I was really starting at Nelvana. And they'd had a really neat show where I had Mike Mignola and Art Adams. Those guys were huge at that time. So I went there, and it was at the concert hall in Toronto, which is at Yonge and Davenport. And it's really a music venue. I can't think of another time I've ever gone to a comic convention at that venue. But so there were it's kind of weird. You had the balcony, and then you had the stage, and they had set up a long table on the stage, and all the artists that were attendees at the show, had a spot on the table. So I went up there and just looked through some pages, and this was the nicest Phantom Stranger page I could find because it had that nice big head in the lower corner. Yeah. Phantom Stranger, and then it's got him doing the whole, overzealous preacher thing with the hands outstretched, and so that was kind of cool. And then Mike Carlin was sitting right next to me. He volunteered to sign it. I didn't even ask him to. Writers and editors, I guess they want to get their shots in when they can too. So I said, "What the hell?" So he even did a little sketch of him, a little sketch of his head there. So.
Oh, that's funny.
The funny part is after I had bought the page, and I had always brought my portfolio with me with my own sort of art samples, but I brought it to shows more as a sort of a hard case that I could, if I bought anything, it wouldn't get bent out of shape. I could just sort of stick it in my portfolio. So I'm taking 5 in the balcony, just resting and kind of looking at all the artists sort of milling around and stuff like that. And this kid comes up to me. And he said, "Are you an artist?" And I said, "Well, I hope to be." I said, "I've got my samples." And he said, "Oh, wow, can I take a look at your stuff?" And I was kind of flattered, so I opened it up and he looked at it and he goes, "Wow, this stuff is pretty good. Can I show you my stuff?" And I thought, sure, what the hell? I'll take a look at it. And he was asking me for advice about what he was doing and stuff like that. And the figure work was quite good. But this was an image kid. By that time, I could recognize them a mile away. Everything was dripping with extra sort of hatching, and every tiny detail was overdone. And when I see that stuff, no disrespect, I mean, I love Jim Lee, but most of those guys at that time, it was noise to me. I couldn't read the character on a background. I couldn't read any of the layouts. I didn't understand how the storytelling was working in any sort of way. And then I said, well, what do you think of it? I said, well, I think you could probably do with a little less detail, a little less hatching. Don't render it quite so much. The figure work is strong, and you seem to know what you're doing. And I said, don't sign it Splat. Use your own name or whatever. And Splat, I'm going, he goes, that's my name. I said, what? He goes, yeah. And then he goes, my name's Stephen Platt. And I didn't even know what that was at the time. He had not even been hired yet, I don't think. At that time, he was an OCA student, an OCAD student. He was taking Ontario College of Art. I don't know what he was taking, illustration or whatever. So it just shows you how much I know. he goes on to make, oodles of money and stop working at Nelvana.
Well,
crazy story.
That's a great story.
I know, that was a good story. So I learned a lesson there. You gotta be careful what you say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's look at some Darrow. This is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I bought these through my connections on CFA app, but if I'm not mistaken, I think I bought these both from Don Mangus, who is a Texas-based collector. And this is kind of the way Jeff Darrow works. He does the penciling all on Bristol, even in bits of Bristol. I think a lot of times he cuts them up after the fact just so he can sell them piece by piece. But he does all of the finished work on vellum with markers on top of vellum. He puts it on a light table. It doesn't have to put it on a light table because you can kind of read the pencils right through the vellum. But so the panel on the left is a dream sequence. People that are unfamiliar with the story, it's basically a cyborg that is kind of a hired assassin, but they've implanted him with memories. One minute he thinks he's a tax collector, and the next minute he thinks he's an insurance investigator. And then the panel on the right hand side is him getting into a gunfight with another sort of robot assassin, the sort of, I call her gruesome granny. I think she's described as Unit 2, and I think this guy, the Celts Nixon character is Unit 4. But you can see he's probably had better days. If you take a good close look, you can see there's a spark plug in his forehead. And then the springs and the grease and whatever else is sort of coming out of him. But Darrow was one of those guys, like I'm a guy that's really into fundamental drawing, who really, people that can draw sound figures with volumes and perspective. And his work is always a bit of a mystery to me because there's almost no detectable underdrawing. If I was going to do a figure like this, I would be working out the perspective. I would be drawing through the figure to figure out what's on the opposite side of, how one shoulder connects to the other shoulder. Right, he just seems to go right at it. So he's really, of the artists that I'm really the most fascinated with right now, I think it's both Darrow and Nolan. Those are kind of my two top guys right now. There are other guys that I sort of am interested in as well, but those are the two that I'm really following everything that they do. So
I love Darrow's work.
Yeah, these were fun to get. I didn't think that it's I've seen much better, the ones where they have the full layout where they've got the backgrounds as well. But his degree of detail is just insane. But then when you look at the way he just I always look at that lady's CAF, the lady standing in the back. Mm-hmm. And it's quite crude the way it's drawn. It's not really, for me, or especially somebody like Dave Stevens, he would be all over that, trying to get the perfect arc, the perfect sort of graceful sort of leg, and he just bangs it out and makes it work. I don't know how he does it, but It's pretty amazing. And then this one, this one I bought in 97 or 99. Let me check my notes here. I bought this in 97 at the San Diego Con. You know, Darrow, if you went to Dave Stevens' table, you know, there's a whole sort of cadre of artists that are right around the corner. It's usually Mignola and Jeff Darrow. And I was looking for original art, specifically stuff that was kind of rarities, stuff that maybe I hadn't seen before. And he had this large figure, which I said, this is really interesting to me. But and originals, you know, this JPEG doesn't really show it, but if you go to my CAF gallery where I haven't kind of photoshopped out the extra piece, he ran out of room on an 11 by 17 Bristol, and he had to draw those flukes that are coming out of the back of his sort of backpack, and he ran out of room. So he basically cut an extra piece of Bristol and masking taped it to the 11 by 17. And of course, it's not frameable. It's not going to look good in a frame at all. But I was just, I'm kind of a process junkie. I just want to see how people are putting shit together. So I said, this looks fantastic, but do you know what it is exactly? And he says, I think it's an image character. I don't even think that he knew exactly what he had done it for. So with a bit of research, you know, I went through the Art of Image Comics and Wildstorm, and I couldn't find it anywhere, but he was contacted by, I think his name was Eric Callan on CAF, and he said, this is trading card art. This is a guy called Battalion, who was the leader of Stormwatch. So, like I said, I don't know shit about Image Comics, but I trusted him, and then he sent me the cards, and so that was pretty cool.
CAF is very good for that.
Yeah, that was great to get that. So, yeah, I was finally, the mystery was solved.
So yeah, that's like Anthony sells a lot of stuff on Dueling Dealers, and he doesn't know what it's from. Yeah, sometimes you know, it's sometimes you just don't know. He was showing me a piece today that he wants to sell tomorrow, and it's just like,
well, it's funny because I always tune in religiously to the Dueling Dealers of Art, but you know, I've come to the conclusion that I'm probably not going to find anything from either of those guys. Like I have bought from Mike Berkey, and but I just haven't seen anything come up. But then recently I went on Anthony's site, and he added some stuff, and there was a guy that I had never heard of before, but he had this amazing sort of sketch by a guy named Martin Egeland. Have you ever heard of that guy?
Doesn't sound familiar.
Apparently he worked on Aquaman for the Aquaman series for a short bit, but I bought this from him. This looks amazing. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. It's Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And it's just done on what do you call it, backing board, but it's got the proportions are pretty wacky, but I just love the inking that he did on it. So, so that was $65. I mean, it's like nothing. So,
well, Anthony is the king of you know, mass quantity sales and cheap art. So yeah. Well, he's got a we're pretty much almost done with it. It's as a redesign for him. So he's going to have a much nicer site. We're going to roll it out on Sunday, May 23rd, when he does his Comic Art Live panel at noon. But I think they're going to be thrilled with it, because you can literally just, you know, go in there and just say, show me everything under $500 with a keyword search or looking at an artist. And I'm sure
that both those guys have stuff that I would want, but I just haven't seen it. So
right. Well, Anthony's site is so old that when you do a keyword search, you can't even sort the results, and the results are sorted by title. So you can't even sort by new. You would think a default search, I think all our default searches after that would have just shown you the newest art first. And his is alpha. So if you search on X-Men, Uncanny X-Men is on page 30, you know. So it's an absolute mess. And yeah, people are going to be thrilled to, you know, I told Anthony, I guarantee you're going to sell at least 10% more artwork on this site once the new one comes out.
You're always telling me that Berkey's got stuff that he hasn't even opened yet. So that's
gosh, yeah, no,
that was always my joy about going to San Diego, because I'd never seen that much art in the same place at one time. And you know, if I'd have had the money I have now back then, it's kind of a scary thought, because I would have just gone nuts. At that time, Mitch Itkowitz was kind of, I don't know if he was repping Bruce Timm, but Bruce Timm had all these amazing color marker sketches that were just fantastic. I nearly pulled the trigger on one of those one time. And yeah, and then Albert had always amazing stuff too, that, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to him as we move on, but we should just keep going.
All right. Yeah. Now you did give me these images kind of together, and I did split them up. These are the four
Okay,
Steve Rude images, but I split them just so I could see better detail on them. So I'll show this first one.
Okay, sure. Oh yeah, so these were, I think I bought these at San Diego from Jim Warden. Jim Warden always had the most amazing Steve Rude stuff. And these were large 11 by 17 tracing paper sheets that had these really meticulous sort of tonal pencil sketches on it. And for many years, I didn't know what it was. I bought this in '97 from him. But I had the dates. You can see on some of these, he's labeled the dates that it was like June or July of '94. And I had a hunch it was a Nexus book. So I went on to Google and just typed up, Nexus 1994 and 1995. And eventually I found this painting that was sold on Heritage. And I thought, bingo, that's it. It's the Wages of Sin miniseries that he did. So it was the #1 cover. And you can see he's worked out all the lighting. The image on the right, you can see there's in red, he's got kind of the light source to sort of indicate, which direction the light source is coming from and hitting it. I mean, the amount of rigor that this guy puts into just one cover painting, you have to sort of bow down and respect that kind of diligence. So.
Oh yeah, without question. Well, clearly you are a process junkie. Yeah. The pieces that appealed to you when you were looking at Warden's.
Definitely, because these were. I mean, I got a lot of thumbnail layouts and inked thumbnail layouts that he's done over the years, but that's what it's about for me. Like, this is the type of stuff that I think most collectors, they're not going to run from, but they're not going to go out of they're not going to cross the street to buy something like this if they don't think that they can frame it or hang it anywhere, or this isn't something that I would hang in my hallway either, but it's just interesting to me to sort of get into his mind, because anytime I saw Steve Rude at a show, the most fascinating thing about getting to Rude's table is going through his sketchbooks. His sketchbooks are just insanity, where he actually does like color gouache sketches like in the pages, and sometimes he pastes in news articles and stuff related to what he's doing. It's just, I've never seen a guy be so thorough. So,
yeah, that's cool.
An unusual guy too. Like, I know he suffers from bipolar. I've seen him at shows where sometimes you catch him in kind of a weird mood. But, if you're battling any kind of mental illness and you're still able to do that kind of work, hats off to him. I mean, that's just incredible.
Yeah, I've met him several times in San Diego. He's always been a really nice guy. All right, here is.
Okay. Now we're getting Plunkett. Yeah, this was actually before I really got to know Plunkett. We'll get into that later. But this is something that I bought from Albert Moy's table, and let me just check my notes here. I think it was '97. Yeah, '97. Solo Avengers 19. And this was actually a story that was written by Sandy. And then you can see in the corner on the left-hand page, it was inked by Scott Hampton.
Oh, wow.
Albert had a lot of great stuff that year, I remember, because I remember it was either this or a $600 Kaluta shadow page. You imagine getting a shadow page for $600? It's insane. No. But this page was only $225. So this was the bargain out of the two. And I think a lot of people had kind of avoided it because they didn't like seeing all those, the patina of the word balloons have all been removed. I don't know if they fell off or they just got lost somewhere. Fortunately for me, that the sound effect things were in there, and they were starting to come up, but I had glued them back down. But you can see all of the art that you would have missed with the balloons on top of it. And I just kind of like it. I like everything about it. It's a story where they crash land. It's called the Vanities of Philip. What was his name again? The Vanities of Philip Whitehead, I think. Anyway, they crash in the jungle, and sort of Black Panther recognizes the area, and there's a demon that shows up every 10 years, and it's every full moon of a certain year, and whatever, it just happened to be that day that they were there, and the only way you can fight it is to sort of mix up some jungle herbs and take it and get what he calls a psychotropic effect, so that he can see the demon and fight it. So this is when the demon first shows up. And he sort of, I think the first word balloon was something like, it squats there, obscene, leering. And and then it's just a crazy story because it's essentially Black Panther on magic mushrooms fighting some creature that only he can see. and he gets sort of not bitten because he's got these claws that sort of inject venom, so that the demon actually injects Black Panther with this poisonous venom. And he's got a white friend sort of traveling with him who wants to save him, but he doesn't really know how to do it. So he basically takes that sort of rattlesnake sort of idea and makes 2 incisions where he got injected and sucks out the poison, not realizing that in saving Black Panther's life, he basically ended his own. So, but I just like all the weird little bits of it, the eyes floating off of the head like that. And
right. That's good storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah. And that weird sort of ethereal bat creature that's kind of flying through, like in the first panel. It's yeah. So
very nice.
Beautiful panel.
Well, we've got a few other pieces by Sandy here as well.
Yeah, in 2001, I actually, Sandy had a bit of a web presence. Like, I don't know if it wasn't really a web site per se, but you could contact him through an email. So in 2001, I said, would you be open to any commissions or something like that? And I said, I'm a big fan of your work. I really found out about his work through Dave Stevens mentioning his name in an interview, because I didn't really grow up with Sandy. Sandy Plunkett has done a very small amount of comic book work. And the reason that's so is that he's just very, very deliberate, very slow. And those are the guys that I kind of gravitate to. So they don't show up very often, but when they do, they're just really dazzling. So when I contacted him in 2001, he said, well, I'm not really doing commissions right now, but it started an email correspondence that I enjoyed with Sandy for almost 10 years. I think the last email I got from him was from 2010. And, I checked them the other day. There were 400 emails that he had sent to me, and I'm sure I sent back an equal amount to him. And we used to exchange snail mail packages. I would find something that I thought he would be interested in, and I would mail it to him, and then he would mail it back to me. So I was kind of friends with Kevin Boyd, who now is known as the talent coordinator for all the Fan Expo shows. But at that time in Toronto, he was part of the Paradise Comic Cons. And he knew that I knew Sandy a little bit. So he said, do you think he'd be interested in coming to Toronto? So I asked Sandy about it, and he was all for it. So he actually came to a couple of shows. And I think I bought this one from Sandy at the 2004 Paradise Comic Con here in Toronto. And I said, have you got anything to sell? And he says, well, what do you think about this? And I said, yes. and he said, I'm glad you bought it, because this is one of my favorites. So Diane the Beautiful. I read all the Carson of Venus books by Edgar Rice Burroughs, but I wasn't familiar with At the Earth's Core and David Innes. I didn't know anything about Diane the Beautiful.
No, me neither.
Yeah. So I actually even used the Sandy's piece as part of the Comic-Con poster. I probably should have mailed that to you, because I designed all the lettering. I wanted it to look kind of like a Conan type thing. Mm-hmm. So that was fun having him up here. So
was that something he did at the show, or did he bring it as a pre-drawn?
He did it beforehand and brought it up with him. He did a lot of stuff to sell. He actually he gave me I don't know if you saw the Spectre cover that he did. He did this really amazing Spectre cover, and he did. I don't think so. He made some limited prints of that, and he gave me one of those. So that was great too. I don't think I have it on my CAF gallery, but the thing is, somewhere along the way, I mean, you can keep going ahead with another Plunkett, but I will tell you the rest of my Plunkett story is that somewhere along the way, I have a feeling that I pissed him off or did him some kind of disservice, because I tried to friend him on Facebook, and I've tried 3 times, and he's never accepted my friend request. So I know that I must have done something. I even talked to Mike Kaluta about it. I said, is he upset with me for some reason? So the thing about Sandy was that he was around the New York scene, and he was really tight with Larry Ivey, who, I don't know if you remember the fanzine Monsters and Heroes. Mm-hmm. But Larry Ive was a guy
Yeah.
that he hung around with Frazetta and all those people too, Roy Krenkel. So Larry Ivy didn't have any family, never really had children. And when he moved to the West Coast and passed away, Sandy was basically the executor of the estate. And so he had a lot of stuff that he had gotten from Larry Ivy.
Mhm.
And I think Larry Ivy, Frazetta would throw stuff out in his garbage, and the first thing Larry would do was take it out of the garbage. So he had a few odds and ends like that. And but I think Frazetta also gifted him with a few things. And one was a Dinosaur Battle that I had never seen in any of the Frazetta books. And so I can't remember if Sandy explicitly told me never to show it to anybody, but I published it on my old blog like years ago after Frazetta had passed, and that might have been it. The other thing that I think upset Sandy was that I tried to get him on the whole, because he was never a guy that was making a lot of money. Like he was always living basically bill to bill. In 2005, his landlord said, "I need you to get out of that house you're living in." He was living in Athens, Ohio at the time. And so Sandy wrote me, he said, "I think I'm getting kicked out of my house." He said he'd offered to sell me the house, but I don't have the down payment. And I said, "Well, why don't you get the down payment? We can put some art together. Should be able to do it." He said, "Well, I don't know anything about computers, but if you could sell a couple pages for me on eBay, then I could sort of start to generate some money." He actually had a page from The Rocketeer that he had inked. He had a couple pages that he worked on for The Rocketeer. He wanted to sell that. And he also had a Wrightson page from House of Mystery. I can't remember what year it was. It was 1972. And it was from that story, All in the Family. I don't know if you ever, it's got that famous globby creature.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it's from that one. And that was an amazing page too. So I said, well, if you can somehow send scans to me, I have an eBay account. I will put them on eBay for you with the reserve price that you're comfortable with, and we'll start to get some money together. So I did that. I sold both pages on eBay, and Thomas Jane, the guy that played the Punisher, he bought the Dave Stevens page. And then a guy named Simon Reed, who I think is a CAF gallery, he bought the Wrightson page. So I think he got something like $5,000 together. So that was already, we were headed in the right direction. But then the frustrating thing for me, of course, was that they were going to send me the money and I didn't have the artwork. I had to contact both these guys privately and say, "Oh, by the way, the artwork's coming to you from Athens, Ohio. I don't actually have the artwork." And that freaked out both of them a little bit. Thomas Jane was a little better about it, but Simon Reed was a ball of nerves. So I basically got the checks and banked them, sent money wires to Athens, Ohio. So Sandy got the money, and then he sent out the pages that way. So that worked out. And then I tried to get him, get the ball rolling with him doing commissions. I said, your stuff is amazing. I'm sure there's an audience for your stuff. You've got to start putting stuff together, and I will help you sell it. So on Ray Cuthbert's gallery, he describes me as Sandy's agent, but I was really just trying to help him out. And I didn't even know if the experiment would work. I said, "Listen, you've got to be patient, because in order to build patrons for your stuff, you've got to start with low expectations and then build from there." And I don't think he had the patience to do that, because the first one, he was very disappointed with what it sold for on eBay. And I said, "Listen, you just got to give it time. And the next one, as soon as your reputation and starts to spread and people find out about your stuff, they're going to be bidding against each other and the price will go up eventually." But I think he just thought that I'd let him down the wrong path. And that could be another reason why he was upset with me. It's something that it really bothers me, because I really do love the guy and I still love his work. I think he's amazing. But something happened there where these things happen. So this you can actually see in the corner. It says, "Hey, Rich, a small thank you for all your generosity." And this isn't the only version. This is an ink prelim. That's the other thing about this guy that's very, very rigorous. He does pencil sketch, he does a tight sketch, he does an ink prelim, and then he finally gets to the point where, he does the ink version, and then if you're lucky, he'll even do a color version. So, but the thing is, as payment for me helping him out on eBay with selling those 2 pages, he just sent me a package of all kinds of stuff, like stuff that he just sort of had hanging around, rarities that I was just, delighted by, because I didn't even know that he had this stuff. But almost everything in my CAF gallery was gifted to me from Sandy. The Armando Gill, I've got one page that I didn't give you a JPEG for, but it's basically a Scarlet Witch and Vision, also from a Marvel fanfare story, and it's a page that Sandy hates because he thought Armando Gill did a horrible job on inking him. Like he preferred somebody like Alan Weiss or Scott Hampton, who had a little bit more sensitivity to what he was doing. Mm-hmm. But I love it. But Sandy says you should just burn it and spread the ashes at Yucca Flats. I don't know what that means. he really didn't have anything kind to say about Armando Gill. Sorry, Armando.
Well,
can't please everybody.
No, I wasn't quite sure how to phrase that. But yes, you can't please everybody. That's a good way to put it.
So that's my whole Plunkett story. Now this one is, to quote Beyonce, this is the milkshake that brings all the boys to the yard, because I think this is the one I get asked about the most on my CAF gallery. I actually had a bunch of other Hellboys that I had 2 pages from Wake the Devil, and a bunch of mummy pages, sketches from the Lost Army that I bought in '97. So I was familiar with the routine about, getting at the top of the hopper, and then when they open up the floodgates, run down to the table that you want to get your page from. So in '99, I made a beeline towards Mignola's table, because I definitely wanted to get another Hellboy piece. And I was always frustrated that I could never get a Hellboy action page. And I get there and it's like 2 or 3 people deep, and you got to make your belly your way to the front of the table. And right in front of me was this page, and I basically put my hands on it and didn't let go. And then he said, Mike Mignola said something like, "Yeah, the dealers were here and took most of the action pages, so there's not a lot floating around." I said, "Well, I definitely want this one." And I said to Mike, "Is this $275?" And he says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I feel compelled to pay you $275 for this fine page." He said, "Well, I feel compelled to take your money." We were both happy, and he even threw in a Hellboy mug that I still drink my coffee from every morning. But this was a great. I love this story, and I love this page because it's got him in the full horns. It's got this Uyulak demon who's basically taken possession of Hellboy's crown, the son of Satan, and he can't understand why Hellboy is able to move, because they had kind of a freezing spell that Bromhead in the back there had kind of zapped on Hellboy, and then you get this big fight. So
that's a beautiful page. I can see why you get asked about it a lot.
Yeah, I like everything about it. It's got that humor too. He goes, "Silence, you yapping fool," or "Hey." He's a little bit hurt by the comment. And it's got the gar. I always like those early Hellboy pages where Mike would actually put the sound effect in a word balloon. Mm-hmm. I remember Hellboy saying "boom."
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that I wanted to get. So I was pretty happy about that.
Well, no, that's the beauty. That's what I would hold on for a very long time.
Yeah, that one's not going anywhere. I like I said, I had 2 Wake the Devil pages, and after 9/11. I was still working in animation, and I had met a girl who I eventually married. And I was she was also a layout artist, and she was kind of out of work and coming out of a bad marriage. And I was working steadily, but then 9/11 hit, and all the jobs were digital layout jobs, but they were all using flash layout. They were all flash layout backgrounds, vector lines, and I don't like vector line art. Like I don't. I would say it looks like it's designed by robots. It's not. There's no humanity. It's not. It's a passive line. It's not an active line. It's So I struggled because I couldn't find any kind of when I did Ripping Friends, that was still pencil on paper, if you can even imagine that. But so I really struggled finding work. And then when we got married, she was working steadily now she was working as a storyboard revisionist, and we had bought a house. and we had bills to pay, and I had a fairly decent amount of savings, but she was holding down the mortgage, and I felt kind of like a shitheel because I wasn't pulling my weight. I didn't want to be the deadbeat husband, so I thought, well, where am I going to get some money? And that's basically when I went and sold some pages. Mm-hmm. And the Wake the Devil pages, I bought those in '97 they were like $150 each. Years later, I sold them on eBay for close to $2,000. Like, that kind of appreciation is it's crazy to me that, but that's just the way the market's going. So
yeah.
Well, and that wasn't the only thing I sold. I sold some Schultz stuff that I wish I still had, and Mark Thellison, Mr. Paper Chaser, he's got a great Schultz collection, and I sold a bunch of stuff to him from that, and there's probably a few other things here and there, but it hurt to get rid of the Hellboys.
Yeah, but they were the ones who were going to net you the most money at that time.
And then I divorced later, and then I thought, was it all worth it? Like, but every favorite artist has a divorce story, so.
Many do.
It's not unusual.
No.
Yeah, I mean, my mom and dad were married for almost 50. Or they were married for 50 years, and I just thought that's the way it worked. But I've got so many friends that are divorced, so just it's part of life.
Yeah. Dino mentions that Wake the Devil pages are 5K now.
Yeah,
and up.
Yeah, crazy.
Let's look at we got some Schultz to look at now too.
Yeah, now we're getting to the Schultz. Now, a lot of people on CAF maybe didn't know this, but I used to work on the Cadillacs and Dinosaurs cartoon.
Oh, cool.
What happened was when I was working at Nelvana on Beetlejuice, I worked there from about 89 to 91, and then I really started to burn out. I was working on The Bar at the time, horrible show. But layout is just so much work. The deadlines were starting to, bite me on the ass, and I thought this is just getting to be too much. So my supervisor was coming by to my desk, and I knew he was going to talk to me about it. And I told him, I said, "Yeah, I think you're right. I think I should quit." So I basically, he goes, "What?" He goes, "I was just going to reprimand you, But I just thought the best way out of this is just to take some time off. So I basically took time off, and I actually worked comic book retail for the years, I think 92, and then a bit of 93. I was working at the Dragon Lady comic shop, and that's I think I sent you some photos of me doing those convention poster coloring that I did. Yeah, TowerCon, that was run by the Dragon Lady. Okay. And that was a fun gig too, because I got to meet a lot of artists that way too. He used to hold conventions at the Westin Hotel, and he brought up Mark Schultz even later on too. But I bought this page, I think, in 97 at the 97 San Diego Con. And this gets more to the process junkie argument about, never throw a sketch page away, because you never know when the idea is going to come back and maybe develop into something. It's the kernel that you start to, you rub it long enough, it turns into a diamond. So you had the beginnings of the Cadillacs and Dinosaurs candy bar cover, and you had the beginnings of that nice Cadillacs and Dinosaurs limited edition plate. And you can see the King Kong in the corner that eventually turned into, I don't have any, obviously, of the finished stuff, but I'm just showing you where the things start. I mean, I own the page on the left, and I've never been able to figure out where that dinosaur was from, but I have a feeling that it's somewhere in the Xenozoic Tales story narrative. So, and I think that page, I bought that for $75-85 from somebody at San Diego. Crazy.
Yeah, that was a good buy.
Yeah. And I always wanted a nice finished version of something that Schultz had done. And he'd done a lot of these type of drawings before, but I could never seem to find them or even afford them. But I bought this one way back in the day off of the CBG. I don't know if anybody in the audience knows who Ken Quattro is. He's a Facebook friend that I basically friended him just this year or last year. And he now calls himself the comic detective, but back then he was a bit of an original art dealer, and he had a lot of Schultz stuff. And I think I bought a number of Schultz things from like prelims and sketches, and I sold a lot of that stuff back to Mark Thellison too. But this is one that I didn't want to let go because it was a nice, clean, finished line, and I just love the pose of it too. So
that's a good example of his work.
Yeah, I mean that's something that you could frame and not feel ashamed. So.
Right.
And honestly, I don't have anything in the house framed. The Daniel Torres stuff that I bought off Heritage recently, I am going to get that stuff framed, but everything else is in a big certified Toya.
Yeah, I don't frame much of my comic art. The most of the stuff I have on the wall, are things I picked up.
This is where I work. You can see I got nothing behind me, but I'm always envious of you guys having a nice big space with. I bought this house in Oshawa. It's basically a story and a half. And I don't know if you can see it, but this is actually where the roof starts to bend in. This room is not a full room. It's like the
Sure. Now we get to look at a Stevens.
Aha. So all through my friendship with Dave, I never wanted to burden him with being one of those fans that was always pestering for him or originals, even though, I secretly lusted after everything I saw. He would bring us even into his house after San Diego shows, and we got to hang out in the studio, and he would pull shit out of drawers that you just could not believe. But I didn't want to be one of those guys, so I respected the friendship so much that I didn't want to go there. But then after he passed, suddenly, I think about a year, 2 years ago, Albert Moy just dropped a huge amount of pages from the last chapter of The Rocketeer, the so-called New York Adventure. Now, these were pages that were done in Paris with the assistance of Stan and Vince, who I've also become huge fans of. Stanislaw Manoukian and Vincent Ruchet. I follow Vince on Facebook. He's, I think his name is Stan Vince. So they had a web page together for a little while. And then I think he kind of inherited that page. So a lot of this work, a lot of the penciling work and some of the inking is done by those two guys. I think more so on the page on the right. In fact, if anybody has the IDW artist edition, they actually explain how much of it was done by Stan and Vince and how much of it was done by Dave. And Dave was really responsible for the bottom 3 panels, basically. And then the other page, I have no proof of it, but I think Dave had more of a hand in that one because I've been able to kind of spot his little sort of peccadillos, sort of his tweaking and stuff like that. You can see in the 4th panel on the page on the left, those two in the audience talking together. That's really a Dave thing, where something that's kind of at the edge of a panel, he doesn't want to sort of slough it off. He goes the extra mile to have faces that look like faces and people doing things. And but I love the Rondo Hatton character and Lothar, and I love the lighting on the face. And the guy at Rocketeer Radio was asking me about these 2 pages, and I told him I'm convinced that the Magician is based on the actor Brian Dunleavy. I don't know if there's any film noir fans out there, but if you look up 50s era film called Impact and then look at the lead character and tell me that that's not the same guy. Dave had a magician friend called Patrick Culleton, who he based that character on. But I think the look of the character is based on actor Brian Dunleavy.
Well, that's beautiful. I'm a fan of Stan's work as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's great. It's out of the 2, I want to get a Vince original. I mean, he does these amazing nudes that I'd love to get, but like Stan Manoukian stuff is fun, but it's I don't know, maybe it's just a little bit too kids character type stuff for me.
It is, but they're fun, and I like the fact that they look unfinished.
Totally,
and not in all, right, and they're huge, and not all cases, but a lot of them I love seeing the red line and then the pencil over it. I like process stuff too, and when I look at his work, I just see the craft and the fact that he really enjoys his style.
Sometimes on Instagram he'll show you how he's doing it and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's mesmerizing to watch. He just builds it up slowly and it kind of appears. So
Here is a cook.
Yeah, so this was the very first. I didn't realize it until I checked my notes a little while ago, but this was the very first TCAF, 2003. And at that time, Peter Berkamo and Chris Butcher, they had organized it in a series of different venues that were along the Bloor West Village, sort of on Bloor Street. And the gallery that I explained before that these sheets, these templates with the 3 panels and then a TCAF at the bottom, they were given out at the store to any artist that came in that wanted to, have their stuff hang in sort of a TCAF gallery. So I thought it'd be a fun exercise. I always talked about getting into comic books, but my storytelling has never been such that I've been ever happy with anything, like, especially longer narratives. I just haven't been able to put together a whole story. With 3 panels, I thought I could pull off. So I did 2 of them myself, and then when I did them, I fell in love with them. I didn't want to sell them, so I said, can you basically hang them, and then I will pay you the $20 afterwards? And they said, yeah, sure, that's fine. But then they went ahead and sold them anyway, and I didn't have them. But they went to a friend, Sam Agro, who I know from, he went to Sheridan. He was a couple of years ahead of me, but anybody that's been to a Toronto show knows who Sam Agro is, because he's he sells a lot of comic book pinups and stuff like that. He's got a lot of entries in the CAF galleries, if you look. Mm-hmm. So, but Darwin did this one, and this is a time when maybe people weren't quite so aware of Darwin and his work. He had done some collaborations with J-Bone, and of course he'd done Ego, and he'd gone to LA to work for Bruce Timm and worked on Batman Beyond. But this was before New Frontier had come out, so this was hanging on the wall, and I said, is that still available? And they said, yeah, sure. I said, well, I want that. and so it's more of a memento about Darwin, who, if you hang around Toronto long enough, eventually you're going to run into artists at shops, especially on comic book day. And occasionally I would run into Darwin around town. I think the last time I met him at a store was at the beginning. He was picking up the EC Picto-Fiction volumes that had the unfinished Came the Dawn by Frazetta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
so we went for beers afterwards and chatted. And then the last time I saw him was at the 2014 TCAF. And I could tell right away that he was either not feeling well or he was in a bad mood. And then, of course, he passed away 2 years later. So I'm pretty sure even at that time, he must have had a diagnosis of his cancer, his lung cancer. Because I think his comment to me was, it's so great to see so many old friends here. And I thought that's kind of a weird comment to make. But yeah, I think the writing was on the wall for him. And I feel so bad that guy was cut short at the age of 53, because, out of all the Toronto comic book personalities, I think he's the one that I kind of felt a kinship with. He's the guy that was really just a regular guy that you go for beers with. I mean, because I used to go to the beginning when, Seth and Chester Brown and Joe Matt would go down there, and those guys have all got so many eccentricities that, I knew Chester really, really early on, and I just thought he was the strangest guy. And then Seth, walking around town with a full overcoat and gloves and his sort of 30s outfits. Darwin, he would look at him and just roll his eyes. Like he had no time for that kind of, like, he just thought it was just so false and just a persona this guy was presenting. So, but he was a very down to earth guy and super, super talented. One of the Facebook groups that I'm more active on is the Darwin Cook group.
Yeah.
And because we had a mutual friend, Rodney Dunn, I've got one piece by Rodney on my CAF gallery, but Rodney lived just down the street from Darwin and knew Darwin much earlier than I did. And they would get together and have art talks and have a couple of beers. And so he gifted Rodney with a bunch of photocopies of stuff that has never been published. And Rodney gave those to me. Oh, so I posted them on Facebook. And if you see that sort of raw, early Darwin, it's just mind-boggling. The guy he was able to pull all the reference from, because he was really a devotee of the early Dragon Lady press books, that had like Roy Crane and Mel Kniff and stuff like that. And he was able to just sort of put that out again. And I didn't know him quite as well as people like Jay Bone or Michael Cho. They used to have what they call the Superman Club. And they used to get together on comic book shopping day. At that time, Dragon Lady was already sold and had moved up to College Street. But they all used to get together up there, and they would buy their comics, and then afterwards they would just go out for a beer or a coffee.
So, very cool.
Yeah. And then when he left to Halifax, they had a going away party for him, and I went to that. So that was fun. That was right near the Big Island.
Well, Darwin is always one of the greatest losses, in my opinion, the most recent artist. I mean, I love his work. I really love the direction he was taking everything, and I wish I could have seen much more of his work.
Yeah, one of my regrets is that I didn't pick up early on. Albert had a ton of New Frontier pages.
Yeah.
And there was that sequence where I forget who it was that was flying an aircraft, and you get that sort of psychedelic effect where his head is starting to come into pieces, and the whole dimension of the plane is starting to break up and stuff like that. And I thought, damn, that's a nice page, but I never pulled the trigger. I wish I did. Yeah. Yeah.
We got lots of those stories.
We all have stories like that. Yeah. So this was fun. This was at the 2017 TCAF. And Dave Cooper is a guy that I just, he amazes me. Natural cartoonist, so gifted. And he's got so many irons in the fire. Like, he just seems to be able to go from one thing to the next. And I've met him at so many different avenues too. I met him in San Diego one year, just sitting at a table, nobody around him. I said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" He goes, "Well, I'm doing sketches. You want one?" So he did one for me there. And then I met him at the Toronto Animated Arts Festival International, which is a really odd venue. It's like the Taffy. We got this sort of organization in town for animation. They usually have a job fair. In fact, they just had it last week, Taffy Job Fair. And he was there promoting something. He might have been, he was involved in that pig, goat, banana cricket show that was done for Nickelodeon. And but he had stacks and stacks of drawings that were $20 a pop. So I thought $20 a pop. So I just went to his table and just was leafing through it like for a half hour, just picking up pages. And I picked up 5 right away, set them aside, was looking at another stack. Then Ramon Perez comes up next to me and he grabs my pile of 5. I said, those are for me. So he said, oh, I didn't know that. So then when I got home, because I asked Dave, I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this Kirk Douglas? He goes, yeah, I think you're right. I think that is Kirk Douglas. And I was a big Kirk Douglas fan. So I went home and started looking up, movies that they'd been in. Mm-hmm. So I found all the reference for this page. And some of the other pages I bought were more of his sort of plushy, pillowy girls. But he's got that kind of Robert Crumb ability to go from very adult to sort of very kids-friendly. The guy's done kids' books, but he's also done really demented stuff in Weasel, when he did Weasel and Ripple. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this was a no-brainer, $20 a pop. I bought those. I should have bought more.
You should have. Yeah. Should have.
I don't want to be greedy. I don't want to take them all. So. There's another TCAF discovery. I don't even know how I first sort of met him. But he was going to do. He was scheduled to do a demo about how he does his paintings. So I thought that's going to be interesting. So he did gouache. He takes out gouache and he takes out ink, and he's got these brushes that he works with. And his work has always reminded me of I don't know. It's got kind of a Charles Burnsy kind of quality too. I'm a huge Charles Burns nut, so that appealed to me. And it's got that sort of 50s vibe too, like these sort of juvenile delinquents. And so he did this graphic novel called The Mean Girls Club, and these were characters from it. I think that's Sweets on the left, and the one with the red head is McQuaalude, I think is her name. So, I said, "Are you selling any artwork?" He said, "Well, you can have this if you want." And I said, "How much you want for it?" He said, "I don't know. What are you going to give me?" And I said, "I'll pay you whatever you want." He says, "Does $60 sound like too much?" I said, "No." So I said, "You got anything else?" He said, "Well, I did a demo last week at another festival in Vancouver, and he brought out the one on the left." And I said, "I'll take that one as well." So that was great. I picked up 2 pieces right away from somebody that I'd never even expected to ever have, one of their originals. So double page spreads from the guy. There's a gallery that's selling double page spreads from his Mean Girls Club for I think $1,100. And I looked at it just the other day, and I think I might sort of go back there and see if there's anything there for me. I don't know if anybody picks up Marvel, but just to show you that this guy isn't completely an alternative art sort of freak, he had a story in here called Honeymoon in Hell. Black Widow travels down to hell and ends up marrying the Red Skull.
That's awesome.
It's hilarious. I would love to get one of these pages. Look at this page here. He's got Hitler giving away the bride. It's fantastic. So I would. I'm going to be looking for more of his stuff. So we'll see. But I can tell that it's not. It's kind of out of the people that are into the big 2, Marvel and DC, or into superheroes. I'm sure that they're sort of glazing over at this point. But talking about Charles Burns, I would love to get an original from him, but his stuff is just, there are so many fine art collectors that have.
There are.
Yeah, that I always wanted to get one of the plates from Love Nest. I don't know if you've ever saw that book, but
no.
that was essentially Charles Burns taking old 50s comics and then redrawing them, and recontextualizing them a little bit, but there's no narrative. It's just plate, and then you're looking through it, and the narrative kind of builds itself. Like, it's got some of the same kind of characters that are kind of going through it, and then you kind of, every time you read it, you get kind of a different sort of effect from it. I thought it was really one of his most amazing books. I mean, I like Black Hole and stuff like too, but I don't imagine that I'd get anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Shit. So Shaggy says, yeah, I can tell you that Toronto is one of the places I would very much like to get to once we're past.
Yeah, the CAF was actually this past weekend, and it was all online, and that has no interest for me at all. I think that one of my buddies, Shatan Patel, was doing some sort of live thing, and I think Ramon Perez had something involved too. Like, the Raid Studio in Toronto. Anybody that doesn't know that studio, the Royal Academy of Illustration and Design goes way back. I mean, Karen Stewart, Francis Manipool, Michael Cho, all those guys. It's basically Ramon Perez is kind of handling it now, and they've got a new location down on Queen Street near Roncesvalles, and he's kind of getting more into publishing. Like, the one thing I'm really intrigued by is that they're going to, I don't know if anybody ever heard of the Mr. Monster reprint book. It was a Kickstarter, and I think it got held up because the rights were kind of in question. It's a Canadian creator, but they're finally going to release it. I think it's supposed to come out in July, and I definitely want that book because I was a big fan of the Eclipse version that Michael had done, Michael Gilbert.
Yep.
And then of course the great Dave Stevens cover of Mr. Monster. But the original comics look amazing too. And I'm a big fan of anything pre-code or Golden Age. I mean, that kind of makes me kind of a weirdo, but I like the really old stuff. I mean, I'd rather look at Reed Crandall from way back when than some of the new stuff. So. Wow. But everything's been reprinted, so it's like every time I go to the comic shop, there seems like there's less and less stuff for me to buy.
Well, you're not that much of a weirdo. I mean, there's a lot of guys that like the old stuff too.
Thank God.
All right, we got 3 more artworks here to look at.
We're getting there.
Yep. And I want to try to get this wrapped up in the next 6 minutes. So let's look at the artwork and see what we got here, because I know those last 2 pieces I know we wanted to talk about.
Oh, right, yeah. So Matthew Allison was another guy who was supposed to be at last year's TCAF. Of course, lockdown happened up here in Toronto last March, as I'm sure it did almost everywhere. And the TCAF is in May, so he was going to be promoting his Cancor trade paperback through Head House Books. And I forget how I found his work or saw it, but I think when the quarantine happened, I sort of found the Inking Knuckle videos that were being posted, and they were talking about him.
Yeah.
And I'd seen this posted on their site, and it had been up there for quite a while. And I thought, you know what? he's not going to be at the show, so I can't talk to him personally about getting any artwork. This might be my only avenue for getting one. So I pulled the trigger and bought it, and Cam sent it over in fine shape. Much better shape than poor Bizarro's face. It looks like it was dragged across the floor of crushed glass or something. It's got every little tick and furrow. This is another guy whose work reminds me in a way of Charles Burns. He's got that same kind of dedication, but he's got a different sort of twist to it. It's not quite. He's very meticulous with the hair inking and the details, but yeah, everybody looks a little bit more damaged or distorted.
Right. No, I love Allison's work. I've looked at the Inky Knuckles site many times. I thought about buying a Kenker page. I just haven't found the right piece yet. But no,
I did actually
on my list.
I went down to Big Island and I did buy the Kankor trade paperback, and I have to say, as much as I like his work, the Kankor, it doesn't quite connect with me as much as his commissions. The commissions are just staggering, like the stuff I've seen on CAF, the Swamp Thing one, and
that one for sure.
Yeah, that one's crazy. So that's definitely worth getting.
Yeah, well, he's I don't know, one of the people I really admire. Their work.
And if you know a little about his background, he really he had kind of a rough sort of growing up. Like I think he struggled with alcohol addiction and had his issues. And lately on Instagram, he had been complaining about his eyesight not being what he thought it should be. So he bought himself one of those magnifying glass with the light. So he does his inking now through that.
Oh wow!
I think I'm getting to that stage because when I get to my drawing table, I used to do everything in light blue, and I'm having a harder time seeing the light blue. Like I might have to go jump up the blue, or heaven forbid, indigo blue. But I used to sort of tighten it up by graduating to a darker color. But if you can't see the first color, then you're in trouble. So,
right.
I don't have any of that issue when I'm working on animation because I can just go into Photoshop and get the magnifying tool, just zoom in. But
right. I mean, I even though I have my regular glasses, prescription glasses, I do wear cheaters now and again. I'm finding the need now. Yeah.
I don't know why it took me so long to pull the trigger on a Nolan, because even when I was looking through ads in the CBG, I used to constantly irritate. At that time, Wally Harrington, Wallace Harrington, he's got a CAF gallery. At that time, he was quite an original art dealer, and he had a number of nice Nolans, and he had a number of nice everything. His taste is impeccable. But I bought this from Quan Chang, and the first Nolan I bought, I think I bought from Berkey. I bought an Action Superman cover, and then from Blackline Fever, I bought a Hellboy Jr. Nolan pinup that he had done. So, but this was one that I really like because it's got Hellboy and Ape Sapien. It's great to get two characters rather than just the one, and it's got what I call the Nolan knuckleheads around him. Like he does this sort of motif in a number of his covers where they all look a little dim, like they all look like they were dropped as babies, and they look very reactionary and not too bright. So it's nice that I got that too. But he's an interesting artist to me because he's got the sort of classical sort of drawing sort of technique. Everything is sort of got sound volumes. Everything is sort of staged beautifully. But when you get to his perspective, his choices are kind of peculiar. Like we're looking at an upshot on the statue and then down on the feet of the characters. So that means that the horizon line, because I work as a layout artist, I'm always looking for the horizon line first. The horizon line's got to be somewhere in between. So, and then the leg on Ape Sapien almost looks like it's smaller or too short. But somehow he makes it all work. It all ends up looking great. So,
Abe's got very broad shoulders and very short legs.
Yeah.
Like you say, it works out fine.
Even Hellboy is the legs are kind of peculiar, but it just seems to work. I don't know. And he's a guy that I follow on Facebook, and then he's one of the few professionals that followed back. I thought that was a big deal because, oh wow, Kevin's following my Instagram.
Nothing wrong with that.
Alert the media. This is great. So.
All right. So this is your recent pickups.
Yeah, that's the when I really this is the most I've ever spent on anything. On March 14, the signature auction through Heritage had Daniel Torres art for sale, and I've been looking for Daniel Torres stuff on these shores for forever, and coming up empty. If you go through Comic Tracker, there's international galleries that have stuff for sale, but they're always stuff I don't recognize, and I don't know how to even go about it. And, I remember trying to go after some Love Nest stuff from Charles Burns from our French gallery, and they didn't even respond to my email. So I thought this is going to be my best bet to sort of get at least one piece. Like I was going to bid on one and then maybe two. And when I got the first one for less than I thought I would get, I thought I might as well go for the second one too. And there were a lot of other nice ones too. There was a Madonna illustration he had done for Rolling Stone that I thought about going after too. But so the one on the left is I think from 1989. It was a Playboy illustration for Mickey Spillane's 12th Mike Hammer novel, and I'm a big noir nut, so this is one that I obviously wanted to get. It's got the guy sort of lighting a cigarette, and it's got anybody that grew up with the crazy 60s era Spider-Man cartoon will recognize that kind of sky that's in the back there.
Oh, yeah.
It's that kind of wet on wet watercolor, which I had to do watercolor backgrounds when I was going to Sheridan College for animation. And I found it exceedingly difficult just to rope in the colors to where I wanted them to go. They were always bleeding off into areas that I didn't want to. And when I actually took delivery of this thing, first of all, Heritage's shipping department is a mess. Like it took forever to get to my house. I had to kind of badger them before I really got answers. And so this just arrived last week, actually. And that's, from a March 14 purchase date. That's not very good, I don't think. But if you look at those buildings up close, they're not, it's not bleeding into the building. I don't know how he did it, if it was some sort of frisket or, the way I would have done it was to do the background on a separate page and then cut out all the buildings and then put it on top. That's the only way I can think of doing it. But
right.
It's amazing. So. And then the one on the right-hand side is basically after Rutger Hauer died. I just thought it was illustrating an article on Blade Runner. It dates from November of 2019. It was published in a Spanish sort of called Fotogramas, I think it was called. It's kind of like their version of Cinefex or Cinefantastique and of fantasy films. And But then when I got it, I noticed on the back that Daniel Torres had written Rutger Hauer tribute. So it was after he had passed that he did this for the article, which I guess the article was more about his performance in Blade Runner. But the nice part is that across the top you've got attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion is over the one shoulder, and then I watched C-beams glitter in the darkness, and near the Tannhauser Gate is on that panel, and I haven't quite figured out what all the other panels are. You can see the one on the lower right is basically a shot of the city, and then it's got kind of where he was Deckard was kind of hanging off at the end. So, and I think that
wonderful.
When the cop is talking to Deckard about these guys, they jumped ship or they took a shuttle. They basically hijacked a shuttle. I think maybe that's what the other one is supposed to be about. But, they were both
fantastic pickups from Heritage.
And that's the type of stuff that I would hang on my wall. I don't,
What's the size on those?
I was going to actually took one out so I can show you. This is actually, So this is the killing man.
Oh, wow. That's a little bigger than that. That's great.
Yeah.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. And
so it's slow to ship, but it arrived perfectly fine.
Yeah, exactly. No, the packing was immaculate. I don't have any complaints.
Yeah.
They do
No,
a good job.
I had talked with, I mean, Mike literally got stuff that he ordered from like 2 or 3 different auctions at the beginning of the year. So, and probably that one too just came in the last week as well. So, and he said he had like 5 packages come in. So I don't know, maybe I don't know why they would have gotten behind, but something happened for sure.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's a good pair of artworks to end the show on.
Thanks so much for doing this, Bill. It was a lot of fun.
No, Rich, honestly, like I said, you've been in the chat since we started doing these things, and it was only the dealer, the 3 dealers and me doing the Tuesday chats. So you've always been on my list, and I was so glad.
I was biding my time, Bill.
Well, I was a little worried because you've got a quip for most things. You got a different angle than most of the other people in the chat.
Too much time alone. That's what I blame it on. My last animation job was Green Eggs and Ham 2, which I finished in December. So that's supposed to come out, I think, in November of this year.
Okay.
So the longest part is getting all the animation done and all the other stuff. But I've kind of been waiting for the next big thing, and I don't want to jinx it, but I've got one friend who asked me, "Would you be interested in working on the in the Marvel universe? They're on Disney Plus streaming. They're going to be doing a What If series, and it's going to be animated. Like it's a merge between 2D and 3D. And I'm guessing that the first season is already done, but maybe they want to start on the second season. So I gave a verbal agreement that I'd totally be interested in that. And then the producer at the studio contacted me for my email, and then I haven't heard another thing. So I don't know what the scuttlebutt is. I haven't been talking to anybody lately, but so that hopefully, fingers crossed.
Let's hope it's not another Dave Stevens thing. Let's hope this one comes through. That would be a lot of fun to work on.
Yeah, exactly. And we should mention, actually, I mentioned to you in the green room that there is going to be a Dave Stevens documentary that's being done. Kelvin Mayo is behind it with 2 other guys named Rob something or other, and they're filming people, but I just hope they get all the right people. Like they got to definitely get Jeff Darrow and Mike Kaluta. If they don't, then I'm going to be very upset. But
yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that.
I've made a note to email Kelvin, because since I haven't gotten any of those press releases, I'll make sure that somehow I get on his email list so I can.
I can't remember if you follow Kelvin on Instagram. He's been posting photos from the photo shoots, so you know who's in it so far. But I was a little worried about the Bill Stout photo because he's got a big bandage on his forehead, so I don't know if he hurt himself or what. But
I'm not a big Instagram follower. Unfortunately,
yeah.
There's only so many hours in the day for me, and Instagram is the one that suffers the most. But all right, Rich, thank you so much. If there's ever anything that I could ever do for you, you just let me know.
Likewise, if you need anything from me, please, don't hesitate to contact me. So.
All right, and everybody, thanks for tuning in. We had a really great audience. I mean, I think we were around 80 people most of the show. So thank you so much for tuning in.
And sisters. Thanks for tuning in.
All right. Good night, everybody.